And now let's welcome David Livingston, Senior Advisor, Office of the Special Presidential Envoy for Climate of the United States, with Isabelle Boemeke, better known as the Isodope, for her many nuclear energy followers, to the stage for a discussion on the power of social media for changing the perception of nuclear energy.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, welcome to an absolute privilege for me, a very fun fireside chat with Isabelle, colloquially known as Isodope on Twitter, on social media. Many of you will know her for her enthusiastic and creative and sometimes even fun and esoteric exploration of nuclear topics and her science communication. We're going to have a fun 20-minute conversation here. I'm going to jump right into it. Isabelle, you are the closest thing I can think of as the superhero of the nuclear energy sector. Every superhero has an origin story. What is yours? How was Isodope born?
Well, it all began when a spider bit me. And I don't know, here I am, I guess. So, like a lot of people of my generation, I grew up with the fear of climate change. But I always thought it was something for the future, that the adults in the room had all figured out, and I didn't have to worry about it. Until the 2019 fires in Australia and the Amazon happened, and it was a real wake-up call to me that, climate change was here, and that unfortunately we're not doing enough to address this problem. So as I started reading into solutions, I came across nuclear power, which I had been already interested in, curious about, I guess you could say, and started doing a deep dive. And it was mind-blowing to see that the public perception was completely different from the reality of the technology. And in learning all of that, I also realized that a lot of that misconception came from pop culture, ironically. Things like The Simpsons, a lot of Hollywood movies, and so on. So I decided to use modern pop culture to change perceptions and address the questions that people have, and that's when I started making TikTok videos and posting it across all different social media platforms.
So, in other words, you discovered how to control the memes of production, even if not the means of production.
Exactly.
Now, tell us more about the memes of production. You're quite prolific on TikTok. Why have you chosen that TikTok and similar social media channels as sort of your primary vector of communication?
Not TikTok specifically, but social media in general. Obviously, TikTok was, 3 years ago, was very much the most important social media platform that when it came to video content. Now, all the other ones are also promoting a lot of video content. So I use all of them. I like TikTok because of the younger audience. One of the things that was really cool for me was that the majority of my followers were females, which I think is unheard of in the science communication space. But I like to use all the different social media platforms. I always like to say that social media is free and available to everybody. Everybody is on it. If I ask this room, how many of you are on social media at least once a day? I know a couple of Twitter addicts here who did not raise their hands, by the way. Yes, thank you. So I would say almost all of us here are on social media. And my theory is that on these platforms, you're either mostly a creator or a consumer of content. And I would like to be a creator and try to spread good memes on them.
Excellent. And you're absolutely right, because I've noticed that actually some of the most prominent and compelling voices right now are not just female nuclear advocates, but by the way, female nuclear engineers who also happen to be advocates. And that's just absolutely terrific to see. Now, you talked a lot about youth, and obviously today there's a big focus on the role of youth in nuclear. What do you think is drawing young people in particular to nuclear as a baseload clean energy resource? And what messages seem to resonate most with them?
So the most important point, obviously, climate change. But I think what's different about youth and not youth is that young people don't have those very strong emotional ties to the word nuclear. a lot of the older generation, they grew up with obviously fear of weapons and really merging those two technologies, which in my opinion are completely different, together. And it's very, very hard to break that emotional association. But the younger generation, we didn't really grow up with that fear. We're terrified of climate change. And we know that we don't know about it. And so the amount of young people who are not even in the nuclear space, but in the climate space in general, who came up to me and said, I'm very, very curious about nuclear. I'm open to it. I've seen a lot of really interesting things. I still have to do, more research and learn more, but I'm open to talking about it. It was so motivating. So I think this big, big fear of climate change and just being a little more open-minded to it is the reason why.
And you were just talking about the importance of sort of that intergenerational communication as well. What can we do to improve the dialogue and the communication between young people and, I don't know what you were saying, youth adjacent, those formerly known as young? What can we do to improve that?
Young at heart? Well, there's several things. So first of all, I would really like to thank everybody here and throughout my journey as a nuclear advocate, because I imagine that so many of you, if you're familiar with my content, the first time you saw it, you were like, what is this person doing? This is so weird and so crazy. But I have to say, I've been welcomed with open arms, and everybody has been so generous with their time, with their expertise, and always trying to inform me. And I could not have done any of what I do without all of your support. So thank you, and please keep doing that to everybody else. Giving them information, inviting them into conferences like this, bringing them into the room, and also funding them, because I have to say, not a lot of money in the nuclear advocacy space, so as much as you can support those young voices, please do, because it's, we work together as a synergy, and I think one without the other wouldn't be as successful.
Terrific. One of the things that it seems like is resonating about nuclear energy and about the nuclear conversation is the idea that it doesn't have to be in opposition to any other clean energy resource. It can be in addition to. And also, given the sort of the baseload nature of nuclear energy, given the fact that you can deliver both clean electrons and clean molecules to multiple different sectors, including hard-to-abate sectors, it feels like nuclear has a narrative not just about today's energy but decarbonized. It feels like it's got a narrative around clean energy abundance. Do you find that that sort of abundance narrative is really resonating in your own communication? And what sort of opportunities do you see people imagining and seeing unlocked by having affordable, commercialized nuclear energy, including next generation technologies?
A lot of the messages that resonate are around just being able to do what other clean energy technologies can't do. And this is something that people are just now starting to accept. For a long, long time, you had credible energy experts saying that, no, we don't need nuclear energy, we can do it all with this one technology. But now more and more of those people are coming out of the woodwork and being, turns out my computer model was wrong. So that's one thing that people are very attracted to. The question of energy abundance, I try to educate as much as I can. I have to say, people in developed countries like the United States and different countries throughout Europe, they don't really understand what a life without energy abundance looks like. So I've been really trying to show them visually that no, it's not just about luxury, it's not just about, overconsumption, it's about very basic things. The difference between a stay-at-home mom who has a laundry machine and a dishwasher is night and day with somebody who doesn't have access to those technologies. So I do think that it's important for us to not only highlight the benefit that nuclear brings in this regard, but also show them what energy abundance looks like and why it's so important. We're in the cusp of we are living through an AI revolution, and just the sheer amount of power that these data centers are going to need. And we don't even know, we can't even predict what our technological future is going to look like in 30 years. But I can't imagine that we're going to go cut back our energy consumption. I don't think that makes any sense, and I don't think there's any precedent in history. So always highlighting the importance of energies.
Absolutely.
Vital.
And if you look at the power demands of things like semiconductor fabs, semiconductor manufacturing, the power amount, but also the power quality that's needed, you see a perfect fit for nuclear. You see the proliferation of data centers coming online. Companies like Google and Microsoft turning from software companies to infrastructure companies. You're absolutely right. We're just going to need more and more and more energy to power a prosperous society, and we need it to be clean. But now for something completely different. You talk a lot about gummy bears. What do gummy bears have to do with nuclear energy?
Turns out a lot. No, they don't. But one of the hardest things is to actually illustrate nuclear energy, to give people a visual. You know, we can't show them atom splitting. It's really hard to. And we can show a lot of other things. But one of the visuals that's very compelling, in my opinion, and very interesting to people is the density of energy that nuclear energy has. So I made this video where I show a gummy bear, and I talk about how one gummy bear has the same amount of energy as 149 gallons of oil, a ton of coal, or 12,000 Big Macs. And people, you know, they might not remember the whole thing. They might not even understand why that makes sense, but they'll remember that. Everybody who has seen my videos walks up to me and says, "Oh, gummy bears." And I'm like, yes, exactly. But that is saying something important. It's saying that in smaller spaces, we can create an insane amount of energy, which is actually great news because we want nature to stay that way. We don't want to, you know, cover nature with our energy infrastructure. So always finding ways to bring this very abstract and hard to understand concepts to life and show people, showing objects and talking about things that they see in their everyday lives is important to just send a message and get it to be absorbed. Excellent.
You have some other kind of creative communications, metaphors and strategies as well. I'll say as someone who's starting to show the wear and tear of the 1 week of COP already, skincare for me is top of mind. How do you use skincare as sort of a metaphor and a communication strategy on nuclear?
I mean, tell me about your skincare routine. You have great skin.
Lacking.
Yeah, I guess we're all very, very tired by the end of this week. I love skincare, so that's one of the reasons why I made the content in this way. But also, when I looked at the biggest resistance towards nuclear energy, I realized that the demographic that was against it the most was liberal females. As somebody who identifies as a liberal female, I thought it would be interesting to create content that I found appealing, and if I found it appealing, I thought other women in my demographic would find appealing as well. So when I looked at the most popular types of content for people my age, it was things like skincare, workout, what I eat in a day, and so I created videos with those themes, but then talking about nuclear energy as a way to trick them into watching my videos, because I figured if I just post a video and start talking about nuclear energy, they're just going to keep scrolling. So I wanted to make it as weird and different as possible, and with a very unexpected twist, so it would catch people's attention.
We can call it engagement, maybe, not tricking. Let me also ask, you were born where? You were born in Brazil?
I was born in Brazil.
You were born in Brazil. You're now living in the United States. You're traveling around the world. What has been one of the most interesting stops of your recent travels, and why?
I mean, this is pretty interesting. I love the Middle East. I've been to Jordan a couple of times, been to Egypt, so I always love coming here, and people are so welcoming and warm. I was recently in Slovakia, which was really cool. I visited I'm going to butcher this name, Boemeke nuclear power plant, which is beautiful, by the way. If you're ever in Slovakia, go do a tour. They have this really cool visitor center that talks about energy in general, shows all the different types of energy around the world, is designed for kids, but I loved it. And I think that is a great example of how nuclear power plants should actually be showcasing their facilities. You know, have a visitor center that has interesting activities for kids, teach them about nuclear energy. They also had this really cool 10-minute long video about the history of energy. So it starts with the Big Bang and shows the dinosaurs. I'm sure the kids love it. And it's 3D. So I thought that was such an inspirational thing and something that every nuclear power plant should aim to have, so that they can teach the younger generation about this technology and how amazing it is that we can actually harness the energy inside of atoms. And one thing that I haven't seen yet on that topic of how can we make nuclear energy more attractive or just make it more open towards the public is doing something around the waste, because we're so cagey about the waste. You know, you go into a nuclear power plant and the waste is over there behind some fence and scary looking guys. But you can literally walk up to it and touch the cask and nothing would happen to you. So I think normalizing the waste is also a great way to get people to understand that this is very safe, not just making the electricity itself, but taking care of the waste.
Absolutely, and I've noticed actually, I'll just say, I was briefing a congressional delegation from the United States that is coming over, and that's repeatedly a question that comes up. People sort of say, okay, I'm sold, but ... But isn't the waste issue not solved? And I think you're absolutely right about tackling that head on, being proactive, and explaining to people exactly what sort of our short-term, interim, and longer-term storage options are.
Or just giving them a visual, because when they're asking what about the waste, they're envisioning the green goo coming out of barrels in The Simpsons. That's the visual that they have. So just showing, oh, you want to talk about the waste? Do you know what it looks like? This is it. Just doing that alone already will open their brains to the possibility that this is not something that they thought it was. And then obviously, I don't know how many more solutions we can have to the waste. And if you compare that to every other waste we generate as a society, it is perhaps the most thought of waste.
What's, besides sort of that issue of sort of, kind of addressing the waste issue head on, being better at communicating about it, what's the number one thing that we can do you think, as countries, as societies, as governments, whatever it might be, as the private sector, to really advance nuclear over this critical decade? If we're going to be where we need to be in 2030, what's the number one thing you want this audience to focus on?
I've heard from multiple different people who have been at COP several times that this year was unprecedented for nuclear energy. The amount of support, both from advocates in the environmental community, but also from governments. Of course, we had that announcement of over 20 countries wanting to triple their nuclear energy capacity by 2050. So that's extremely encouraging. So I think we're getting there from a political standpoint, from a public perception standpoint. And my message this COP and lately has been one, and for the industry, which is get it together. Let's build some nuclear reactors on time, on budget, because now is the time to deliver. And I've said this repeatedly throughout COP. We've seen several nuclear renaissances in the past, and they did not pan out. We're living through one right now, and it might be the last one for a long time. Because if we can't deliver it now, if the nuclear industry cannot deliver it now, I don't know how people are going to have faith that it ever will, if we have all of the policies in place, if we have the public support in place. So I think it's time to, all of us, push forward on the advocacy side, but the private industry really needs to deliver over the next decade or so. So that's my message.
Terrific. And we need to get those order books larger, right, to get the supply chains moving. Because the way I like to think about and communicate is the larger that order book is, probably the lower the cost of your electrons and molecules are going to be from the nuclear sector. So let's get those order books growing.
Yes, the order books and delivering the reactors.
Absolutely. Isabelle, final question. Do you have, a dangerous one intentionally, do you have a favorite technology, a favorite vendor, a favorite nuclear application?
Oh my God, I'm gonna be canceled.
All right, or do you love, or let me give you the escape hatch, or do you love all your children equally?
I love all my children equally. My favorite reactors are the ones that are producing electricity into the grid. Those are my favorite reactors, all of them.
Bravo. Complete agreement from the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking Isodope, Isabelle Boemeke. Thank you. Muito obrigado. Shukran.
Thank you. Should we take a photo?